Here with co-host Chip. What is going on today? Bitcoin versus XRP. What do you guys think about that? I think that is quite a topic. Everything you've ever wanted to know about Bitcoin, about XRP, and more. When Moon. That's what we want to know today. And we have a special guest coming to us all the way from the other side of the world, where the toilets spin in reverse.
Or our let's spin in reverse, Jeff.
One
To
or the
be
other.
perfectly fair and honest. And also, too, we're going to jump into some topics, CBDCs, and we are going to talk about some current events that are happening. That's it.
All right.
Guys ready? You guys ready to do
Kick
this?
thing off.
Let's go.
Let's go. Again.
Didn't work. Let's
hit it. Ready?
Go.
Welcome to On the Chain.
All right. So, man,
so drum roll, please.
Exciting day. Exciting
day on the chain. We have a returning guest who has been on the chain before. And let's welcome Jeff. Do the drum roll. Ready, guys? We have none other than Oz Crypto coming from down under. What's up, Oz?
How you guys doing? It's been a minute.
Right. What is going on? It's been great.
It has been a few minutes. Dude, you got the nerd wall behind you?
Few minutes.
The nerd wall is back. I'm super excited to see that nerd wall. And it's grown. Used to just
huge,
be one
exponentially.
At least double. And there was, I don't remember anything on top. I thought it was just on the one, and you doubled it.
Yeah, it was only on the one axis and it was only two. So yeah, it's just one of those things that, because a lot of my videos now, they're all green screened. Although poorly, I'm getting new green screen stuff to try and fix how bad that is at the moment. But yeah, it's one of those passions of mine, man. Like,
nice. Who's that over your right hand shoulder?
Over my right hand shoulder?
Yeah, top shelf.
Mario, or are you talking about up here?
Oh, yeah, those guys.
That'd be Max Payne. Ooh. That one there would be Sam from Splinter Cell. That one's Watch Dogs. Both of those. Yeah, just it's from basically any game that.
What about the mystery
boxes had an impact
back there?
The mystery box,
little question marks. Those question marks, or
they're just the Mario question mark jumping.
Right on. Okay, so guys, you guys know the drill here.
Magical dancing bear.
Magical dancing bear.
Do not get me started on the bearable guy 123 doll, which I got ripped off of. I go on this rant every time. Don't make me do it. Jungle taunts me with his. Hold on.
There was a bearable. So I'm guessing you mean like the cartoon. Bear thing. There was a stuffed version.
Yeah, somebody made a stuffed version. I was the second or third person. We promoted it on the channel. I purchased it. It got sent to my work address, but there was for some reason it didn't get accepted. It got sent back. I emailed him and said, "Hey," he goes. I said, "Hey, I don't know. Can you send it back?" For some reason, he goes, "Oh, sorry, you didn't respond in time." It was about 3 hours, and they sold it to somebody else. The first thing he said was he wanted to charge me another 10 or $12 for shipping. And I said, okay. And then he said, sorry, I already sold it to somebody else. So that's not a cool thing.
Hold on. So their entire, just take a step back. Their entire supply model is we have just enough to fulfill whatever that baseline of orders is. And if we get one sent back to us, we'll just immediately send that one to someone else.
That's exactly it. You just about summed it up. I mean, that's everything, right? And so Jungle from time to time will taunt me with his little doll, take pictures of it around the house, and I'll be like, dude, that's not cool, man. And I wanted one so bad because it would just.
And Chip had all sorts of plans. He was going to bring it all over the place. I was going to travel with it. Put a sign in the U.S.
That's right. I was going to put it in a seat, but not what did I end up with? Nothing. But anyway, guys, drop where the city and the country you're coming in from. We have lots of Aussies in here. And let's start it off the best way we can.
Up one rough Rican.
With a one rough Rican super sticker. Thank you, Rican. Appreciate that. Well, let's start it off this way. Good AOTC. that's the Oz Open right there. But let's jump into some topics here, man. Look who's here.
While we're doing that, how about if everyone gives a quick shout out to where you're tuning in from? We know Oz is tuning in from Australia. We know where we're tuning in from, but give a quick shout out where you guys are tuning in from. City, state, country, whatever you got.
Lockport,
South
New York,
Africa, which is pretty cool. Dude. We got Chewy from South Africa. That's pretty cool.
So just for Beth Madden, she will know this because I grew up in North Tonawanda, which is the neighboring city to Lockport, or pretty close enough. Really? It's like one over, yeah. Yeah, so not many people know where
Got
Lockport is. I know Lockport pretty well because I grew up right around the corner from there. So there you go, Beth.
we've got Belfast. There we go.
Look at
We
this
got
right
the
there. How do you say
Philippines.
that? Manly? Is that it? Oz?
Yeah, Manly, New South Wales.
New South
It's
Wales. There
north
you
of the
go.
bridge. So you go to Sydney CBD and then you go on a ferry. Basically, you can drive there, but yeah, it's a nice place.
We actually have a lot of Australia that tune into On the Chain. You know, so that's it's great.
Martin Redwood, he's an OG here from Sydney.
Got SoCal.
Then we have Maryland in the house as well. Long Island. We have Southern California. So I was hoping someone else joins from Southern California soon. Let's see. We have Delaware. Yeah, it's great. It's great to see where everybody's coming in from.
That's awesome. There we go.
20 bags. How's everyone doing? Just get ready to go to bed. XRP Bags Moon Party was fun. We'll have to do a moon party. Last time we did a party, it was a whiskey stream for 2 hours and it got ugly. Remember that? Thumbnail was Jeff and I did one. It was a thumbnail of an OTC whiskey bottle, and that was
yeah, I remember that. Oh, that was a good one.
The UK in the house, and yeah, we have the we have King Charles, the new one who is I'm sorry, that's not. I thought that was there we go. We got here the afternoon. What's up, Devon? Steve, Cincy's in the house. Beautiful. All right, guys, let's kick this off.
So Oz, we got lots of great topics, and you know, we're excited to talk about XRP. We're excited to talk about Bitcoin versus XRP. And you know what's interesting, just to kind of kick off the theme of this. So there were some rumblings coming out of the White House here in Washington that they want to ban mining. They want to essentially they want to ban Bitcoin. So little rumblings coming out of there. There's also a lot going on in the regulatory space over here in the US. Discussion, you know, maybe a little bit overboard. Things seem to be a little bit more advanced over in Australia. It's like you guys are living in the future. You know, we see a lot of
12 hours in the future.
12 hours in the future. So a lot happens in those 12 hours, and we just can't seem to catch up. We're always 12 hours behind.
It's that's the thing that really confuses me so much about the US is like in this space right now is because the US has always been this powerhouse, right? Like as far as that was me writing that because
I know
I'm on here.
Check it out. Oz Crypto. What's up?
The main thing that's always been a thing for America is they've led the way. They haven't followed the trend. They've led the way. Like look at the movement into Silicon Valley, the technological movement, the entire growth set of the internet originated in the United States. Like, absolutely, it's the internet, so it then kind of spiraled out. But without Silicon Valley and the original companies there, that HPs, the IBMs, all those organizations that sprung out, we wouldn't be where we are. And then you look at today with cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. And I had a video last night that I put out where the only way I can see it is when it first started, the US government was like, it's not going to be a big enough thing. Like, it's not worth our time. Let's just shy away from it. It'll go away on its own. We won't even think about it. And now it's at a point where it's so large that they're kind of scattering, and they've got one person at the SEC who is Gensler and a different person at the SEC. And I can't remember the guy's name right now, but I was reading an interview with him about an hour ago, who is literally, they can't agree. Like, they can't agree on whether this should be regulated this way or this way. And in the meantime, you've got, Australia, parts of the UK, large parts of Asia that have already come out and said, this is our left and right of center. Like, this is what a cryptocurrency is. This is how it needs to be traded. This is how it needs to be treated. Now, if there are nefarious actors in any place, then that will still be handled within whatever that jurisdiction is. But much like the internet and internet crimes, it's bizarre to me that the US hasn't done more than they have.
Well,
do you guys have a take on it?
Yeah, man, that was well said right there. But I have a take here. First, they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you. We're in the fight you part right now, then we're close to being in the winning part, right? Pretty soon. So that's kind of where we're headed in this whole sort of debacle. Yeah. But
it is crazy, right, Chip?
It is crazy, but I think you know what? Let me just say a word. Let me say the F word: fascism. Okay, so fascism plays a pretty strong part in this whole thing. I mean, we just had what we would refer to as the red speech that threatened a good portion of the population. Yeah, the president threatening people. Like, we've never seen that before either. Like that, we haven't. yeah, there's been a lot of rhetoric in there, but ultimately, I think what's going to happen, and this is a hard thing to hear, especially when somebody, like you, Oz, calling this out, perfectly said. The U.S. has led the way, but now you have like the UK saying, "Hey, come over here because we want to be the leaders. We want to be the golden, people who lead the way with cryptocurrency." And you have a lot of other places too. But just like anything, there's always revolutions, and we see what's happening around the world. I think we get there, and I think we get there probably quicker than people imagine. And what's going on in the White House right now, and I'll get Jeff's take on this in a second. This is just more propaganda, right? It's like, oh, it doesn't fit in with the whole greenness and everything has to be. If you want to see how that's working, take a little trip to Europe, all man-made. Hey, listen, this winter, when you're freezing your ass off, you know what you can do? Get extra blankets, buy a tea kettle, pay 20 pounds. They'll save you 10 pounds over the course of a year. You're going to sacrifice. We're not sacrificing. We just had California here. And this is all connected. We had California, Gavin Newsom come out he had like a parka jacket on in the middle of summer with a baseball hat on. He was all geared up, and he's like, guys, it's going to get rough. It's going to get rough. You're going to have to turn your air down. Don't, even though like 2 weeks ago, they passed a law that said that all gas powered vehicles will be eliminated in 2035. 2 days later, they said you cannot charge because our power grid can't handle it. Don't charge your electric vehicles. So all of this stuff is man-made by nut jobs. And they all happen to be in important places. And they happen to be spread out through all governments throughout the world universally. So but you know what's happening is there's a revolution. The crypto revolution is one thing, but people are standing up. You know who you don't mess with? Farmers. You know who else you don't mess with? Truckers, because they fight back. And you can just see what happened in the Netherlands. They took out the guy who made the ridiculous policy, and he had to resign. Jeff, go.
And that's, I'm going to say, kind of say the similar kind of thing, but here in the US, we've obviously led the way for a long time. We have run into a major road bump, speed bump, so to speak. We talk a lot about the pendulum, and the pendulum, when it's artificially, the pendulum always swings, and it swings typically in the center, comes a little right of center, goes back to center, comes back right of center, goes back to center. It's been artificially pushed to the left significantly, and it's impacted everything, right? So it's impacted our mindset, it's impacted our economics, it's impacted rationality. And so now what's going to happen as that pendulum swings in the other direction, which we're seeing it happen, and it's happening exponentially at this point, we're going to see a major turn. And so we're anticipating November is going to be a turn of the tide. And it's going to be very, very significant because you're 100% right. The U.S. has done a great job over the years, and it's led, maybe not always perfectly. There have been some issues along the way. But since, World War I, World War II, we've seen U.S. involvement to a major extent, and, from a geopolitical perspective. And this is no different, because we're seeing a revolution right now that's going on with a brand new technology and a new financial technology. But the thing is, regardless of how we look at it, because it doesn't matter what aisle of politics you fall on, there's going to be, a bunch of morons, and the thing is, and the reason why, the reason why we
Jeff,
say
that's putting it lightly, Jeff.
But the thing is that, we have a major power struggle going on right now. And so this technology specifically, unlike, even the internet in its beginning stages, faced a lot of resistance, and people said it was a fad, right? Amazon, they said would never succeed.
And they actually said it was a Ponzi scheme. The same things that, like, literally the exact same phrasing, they just dug it up. But sorry, go on, continue.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but that's the point, is that there's always going to be people that don't get it. There's going to be resistance. When we get into money and we get into the economics of it, there's power that goes along with that. And if they see that their power is being threatened, people are going to try to hold tight to what they have. And so the political echelon have really sold us out. Look at that. It's funny. As I said that, Beth said the same thing. She's saying, our leaders have sold us out. And that's exactly right. We see that every single day. We see, when we reference the swamp is large. and it crosses all political spectrum, and it crosses all borders because it's all over the world. You know, we watched and saw what happened over in Australia politically. We saw what happened in Canada politically. We saw what happened over in the Netherlands politically. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know what people like? People like freedom. You know, people enjoy their freedom of movement. They don't want the government intruding on their lives, and they want the freedom to make money. And that's what this is really all about. And, you know, when we go to this decentralization of finance, is really, really significant, and people are resisting the brick and mortars, the Jamie Dimons, and, you know, Chip, bring that slide back up, because I think that's so relevant. Yeah, we should put a gauge. We should have a gauge of where we're at. We're kind of like at that midnight hour. We're at 11 o'clock. You know, sitting in that space where they're fighting us right now, and they're fighting tooth and nail. You know, and that's it right there. You know, and so, like we said, first they ignore you and ridicule you, which they did with the internet boom. You know, they're doing it with where we're at right now, and now they're fighting. They're fighting tooth and nail to maintain their power. Their political elites are crumbling left and right, because what we've noticed over the past couple of years is that, you know what, if you give them a little bit of power, you know, power corrupts absolutely. And, you know, we can't allow that to happen. And so this is the turning of the tides, and, you know, we're excited about it. I think it's going to be amazing, you know. And then we've got you know, what are your thoughts? You know, as because obviously we heard your observation, but you're also over on Australia.
How does it end?
How does it end? You're in the future. You're ahead of us. What's going on? What's going on, Oz?
What the whole government landscape is such a tricky one. There's a couple of quotes that I often refer to, and one of my favorite quotes is from Winston Churchill, where he said, democracy is the worst political system we have, except for all the others. In that, this is what happens consistently in any government, in any situation, is you have constituents that are the main pushers of any political party. Once that party's in power, they're playing to the constituents, not to the general public. And when you've got a two-party system, or primarily two-party system, that's a continuous cycle. So I think as far as the shift goes from the higher, like sort of the federal level within the United States, I think regardless right now, whether they're on the left or the right, they're seeing it. I'm shocked it took them for as long as it did for them to see it. But, you know, you're starting to see countries adopting Bitcoin as national currencies. You're starting to see CBDCs are the standard practice, because everyone knows that the future of all of this is blockchain. There is no reason to not accept it. You've got countries in Europe that are already using it for voting. And yeah, I can keep ranting and rambling on about it, but yeah, without going into any specifics around what I think about the politics within the US, because I think Australia has the dumbest politics. I said this when I was talking to Eri. We have compulsory voting, and I think we're the only democratic country in the world that has compulsory voting. And if
so
we're not,
that, what does that mean?
So you have to vote. So an election, you'll have local, state, and then federal elections, and then dependent on which level those are, and they all happen at different times, just to be clear. Yeah, you get fined for each of them, and if you don't pay it, or if you don't respond to it, it then goes up in exponentially.
Sounds like freedom to me.
Where it could be thousands.
That's great freedom. I
how
like
is that
idea,
democracy? Chip. Like, don't you have a right to not vote if you don't want to? Like, it's
correct.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, though.
The idea.
But one thing that I will say that the rest of the world can be at least somewhat, maybe an ounce of gratitude to the U.S. The only thing, so first of all, we're a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. We have the Electoral College. We do. It's not, you know, a typical democracy. It's like, well, it's the masses. Whoever, you know, that's not how it works in the U.S. The framers and founders of this country foresaw they don't want people in the big cities selecting for the regular folk everywhere else, right? In New York, I grew up in Western New York. Okay. And the attitude there is, if you talk to anybody and say, yeah, I'm from New York, they go, oh, what part? And what they're referring to is one of the 5 boroughs, you know, right. Brooklyn or Queens, and if you say like, oh, I grew up on the West Side, they go, oh, and like they've dismissed you as a human being and as someone who lives in New York. Like, and they think that New York,
oh, we're upstate. And then
we're upstate. Say, like, are you Poughkeepsie? Because I might still talk to you if you're just across like 45 minutes to an hour. If you're LI, Long Island.
Upstate. Yeah,
I might have a conversation.
That. Right.
This is funny because in other words, like, you know, and you're not in New York, but it's just so weird. They named New York, the city, the same as the state. We don't have a Florida. We don't have a California, but we have a New York. Explain it. It used to be called New Amsterdam. I don't know how it happened. But I will say the one thing that is probably holding it by a thread is the U.S. Constitution, which is the contract from we the people that tells the government what you can't do. You can't do this stuff. So, and that's the only thing. So what happens is the particular team and party right now, party team, whatever, they go ahead and do something. Takes a while to work through the courts. Supreme Court says unconstitutional. But they know it takes 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever mandate they come out with. So that's the only probably thing we have. Because let's face it, man, if the U.S. falls, it's over, Johnny. It's all done. It's out. We're all out. And it's like fend for yourself. Make sure you have a weapon. And good luck out there.
The whole world goes into chaos.
I just imagine the whole world turning into like Switzerland. Everyone just becomes neutral all at once. Like, just no, we're all friends. We're cool. We're cool. Like when you hit a sibling and then you run away, you're like, I'm sorry.
Think about Switzerland. How great is it to be in Switzerland, though? You're neutral. Everyone put your money there, and they were relatively crypto friendly too, I think, right in the beginning. Right. So what a great thing. It's like, no, we're not getting involved.
Everyone's military trained, so that's also a good thing, I guess, for your populace.
Yeah, that's the other thing. They have compulsory military service in Switzerland too. Everyone has to serve, and it's relatively clean over there. It's nice. Switzerland's pretty cool. I like being over there.
Yeah, the thing about most people outside the U.S. they don't understand the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms, right?
You guys used to have something similar to that. Not
you
anymore,
guys gave up your guns. You guys
gave it up through that compulsory voting nonsense.
Let's talk about that. The compulsory voting, and everybody, let's get rid of them all. And then what happens? You get locked down,
honestly, like Jim Jeffries, if you've ever seen Jim Jeffries as a stand-up comedian, he kind of puts this perfectly from the Australian perspective, in that at this point, gun violence in Australia basically doesn't exist because the black market of weaponry into this country is only generally at the profile or money level of like biker gangs who are drug distributors, and they don't generally shoot up innocent people. They shoot other biker gangs. So like if you went out tomorrow and tried to buy like a handgun, let's say a 38, you want to go out and buy a 38. If you bought it on the street, a 38 is going to cost you $15,000. So if a criminal has enough money to buy a handgun, they're not going to use it to steal someone's wallet. You know what I mean? Because that, like, if you've got that much money, you're doing some higher level of crime, whether it's moving drugs or whatever it may be. So generally gun crimes in this country, very low. Like, I think we have like, I haven't seen the statistics for the last couple of years, but you're talking like fewer than 10 gun deaths a year that aren't accidental, self-inflicted.
But Oz, that's good to hear. I like those stats, but that's not what the Second Amendment's for. It's not to protect against each other. It's to protect against tyranny. Against tyranny, right? That's what it is. That's why there's always like, you got to get rid of this gun and that gun and this violation and this thing. But also too, I mean, without getting super conspiratorial here, there's a lot of manipulation going on. Let's just say that that's happening because, and also too, people think, oh, the U.S. is #1 in gun violence. It actually is not. According to population, it's further down on the list when you actually look at it on the populace. How much gun violence to that? But it's a good story. It sells, and there's people over in the U.S. are shooting everything up. But here's the weird thing. You know where there's not a lot of that happening? In Texas. You know where not a lot of that happening? In Florida. Why? Because we carry. It's like someone gets in an altercation, boom. It's everybody can carry, and in some states it's open carry. You walk into a store with a rifle on your back, okay, and you go like, "Hey, come on, bring it on, let's go." And so when everyone has armed, people, where all the gun violence happens? Jeff, tell them where areas where you're not allowed to have, like schools.
So soon you're going to see, well, you look at like Chicago, New York, all the places where they have the strictest laws, they have the worst violence, but then you see a lot in the inner cities and, kind of goes unchecked, and they don't seem to care about that for some reason, but they do come after they come after the law abiding citizens, relatively easily in those states. And it's an unfortunate situation because if, we can get it. It's a longer conversation, but it's interesting because the way they do this is the same way they are trying to treat cryptocurrency as well, and what is that? I love Alchemist.
Yeah. Just so you know, these hosts right here, right-wing propagandized agenda. Yeah, it's called freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. It's falls right in line with
our propaganda of freedom.
But anyway, listen. I want to change the topic into CBDC. Go ahead, Oz. You had something to say first?
Just one final thing about why it's probably good that Australia doesn't have guns. And a lot of people, in fact, a lot of Australians watching this may not actually know this story. And if you don't, you should go and look it up because it's one of my favorite parts of Australian history. The only war that Australia ever declared was the Emu War. And just let that sink in for a second. A war against emus. This actually happened where they were taking over so many farms that they enlisted farmers, and eventually the Australian army got involved in the early 1900s. Emus. So emus are like ostriches, I guess. They're one of our national emblems. If you don't know what they look like, they're a giant bird with with tiny head.
You might be right on this. This makes sense.
And they're aggressive, right?
Yeah, and they were eating up all the crops. So on average, it was taking the farmers 10 bullets, like 10 shots fired to take down a single bird. The military, 60. The Australian government ended up coming out and declaring the war, like they weren't going to have. We lost a fucking war to birds.
Good thing you guys don't have guns.
It's a good thing we don't have guns.
The argument is starting to make more sense.
Now makes sense.
Let's segue a little bit to CBDC. So saw a video that you put out the other day. I don't remember what it was, but you put a video out about CBDCs where you're kind of explaining a little bit about those. So I wanted to jump in and kind of get your thoughts on this. But CBDCs, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your general outlook was that you viewed CBDCs as something that would really help mass adoption. Is that more or less on spot?
100%.
Want to elaborate?
So from the existing countries that already have, I guess, similar systems to the US, the main two are Australia and Brazil, and they have it's a centralized ledger. So a ledger that just shares that information between every bank that has access to regulated financial systems. So you don't have to be part of a particular boys club. You don't have to be part of a particular big four banks or whatever. If you have access to you meet the regulation requirements, you can pay into that system. The whole point is that it centralizes it to one thing. So although every bank's still got their own little internal books and ledgers to know how many accounts are here and how many accounts are there, there is one centralized spot where all checks and balances can be kept. And that's how we get real time. Like if I want to send money across the other side of the country, it will be done like that. Like it is within 10 seconds because it's just done on the ledger. So in order for things like XRP and side chains and custodial simplicity to work, you do need a centralization. You do need something that's going to be controlled by the government because there is no fucking shot. Like there is no shot, in my opinion, people probably strongly disagree, that the government is going to give up control of their central banking authority. Like it is the one thing that you have that controls your economy and therefore controls your populace. So to me, CBDCs seem like the logical first step to say we need an environment that we can choose to use however we want before we can then start going international. Every bank will have access to it. It all centralizes into one place. It's easy for a government to track. It's easy to do anti-money laundering, know your customers, all that type of gear. But yeah, it takes out the additional steps. So that's kind of the reason for my take on it, as opposed to everyone who I've seen a couple of strange arguments. Like one was that XLM is being used in one particular country where the Stellar representative literally came out and said, it's not using XLM. We're consulting them on how XLM works so that they understand what they need to do. But they're not using it because they're building their own CBDC. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, let's make XLM our national currency.
Right. They were building on Stellar.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
They're using the Stellar platform, and so there are a lot of misnomers out there, but that's interesting, and I agree to that point that countries don't want to relinquish their sovereignty over currency. However, you still have the central bank issue where the central bank isn't beholden to the government, like the Federal Reserve here in the U.S., which is who knows who owns it exactly. It is made up of multiple families over the years, and that Federal Reserve through the central bank has control over other countries as well. So the question is who actually controls it. But at the end of the day, if we look from a country perspective, they still have some sovereignty over their currency. And so, right, are they going to give that up and say, hey, we're all going to allow Ripple to roll out the national currency and we're all going to start using XRP? They'll do that if they have some semblance of control over it. El Salvador has made Bitcoin a currency, but it's still not their national currency, right? So they've allowed it to, work side by side, but they also have economic issues and stability issues. And so we're seeing that in a lot of countries. This is an opportunity to help regulate and stabilize their economies, right? So if you have an economy that's unstable, that is relying on the U.S. dollar because they're only going to use the U.S. dollar as primary currency, which we've seen. Look at Venezuela. Venezuela with a believer, and now they only use the U.S. dollar in Venezuela because they destroyed their economy and they have no stability in their sovereign currency. That's done. Now, if you were to bring crypto to that level, not necessarily a CBDC, but if you're using the US dollar, you might as well use Bitcoin and XRP and other things like that. So I do agree to that extent. Chip, what is your take on it? Because I know
you stole a little bit of this thunder there, but it's so weird. I'm trying to disagree with Jeff. We just can't disagree on anything. So it's like kind of a weird, we're always lockstep. Sometimes they'll push my buttons.
Coming back, Chip. It's that agenda.
Just a mess with me sometimes, but I want to just go on a little bit of a rant here. So let's look at this. So this is the Federal Reserve, which Jeff was referring to, basically 5 tenets, right? Conducts the nation's monetary policy. Okay. And then we'll talk about why all of this is a sham. Promotes the stability of the financial system. How's that working out? Not so well. Okay. Fail twice. The third one, safety and soundness of individual financial institution, and cross that one off. Fosters payment and settlement systems safely and efficiently, debatable, and promotes consumer protection and community development. I don't know what the hell that means, but it sounds like it might be a mini win for the Federal Reserve. And then I want to jump over to here, because here, let's go over to the Constitution right here. This is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5. Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. Now, okay, sounds great. But if we look at the second central bank back in the 1800s, Andrew Jackson said, F you, and he got rid of them. And if we look back to what the framers looked at in the US here, they allowed only Congress has the authority to be able to coin either whatever it is. They say coin to coin money. That's what the term is here. Okay, so if only Congress has that, how did they relegate that responsibility to a third party, what Jeff talks about, which nobody knows? It's never been audited. Imagine, since 1913, no one's ever seen the balance sheet. Nobody knows what they're doing behind closed doors, and nobody knows really what they have their tentacles in, right? What kind of real estate and everything else. So there's a big issue right there. So now, and we just had a case here not too long ago. It was Virginia versus the EPA. And the reason the Supreme Court came down on that was because Congress was relegating their responsibility to the EPA. Yeah, go ahead, just make up stuff, right? So in 1913, and this is the thing, I believe, and I've predicted this a couple of times, that the Federal Reserve will eventually go away, and it'll probably be within the next 3 to 5 years, maybe quicker than that, because it's a failed system. Inflation started happening incredibly in the 70s when we got off the gold standard. Usually these central bank systems. Now, Oz, I will say to your point about the CBDCs, I can see an adoption happening. I worry a little bit about, again, this third party, and most central banks, like especially the European Central Bank, same type of system. Who knows who's actually running it? Sometimes unelected officials. And when you have this kind of massive power, you're absolutely 100% right. They will go through any lengths to retain. But I would rather have governments coin their own money. So in line with that, like if the U.S. government said, we're going to coin, it's not going to be a third party. It's going to be blockchain based, and it's going to get completely open. You're going to see everything that's going on. I would be more interested in seeing that than what we have now. Is like, okay, now it's because, you pull up your bank account, it's a digital number. I mean, unless you go to the bank and pull out fiat currency, it's pretty much digital already. And then is it going to be backed by anything? Backed by gold, backed by any kind of assets? It's going to be backed by Bitcoin, XRP, something of value. And so when it comes to that, but Oz, are you worried at all about the programmability of a CBDC where you could potentially control how, where, when people spend their CBDCs, suppose they go into effect?
So one of the things that I do for fun and have since I was quite young is hacking into particular systems and kind of playing around and seeing what you can do. And just a current example is
we shut it down, Jeff.
A number of prison systems within the US are actually online. And there have been entire instances where alarms have been set up from external and a number of things have happened. There's a similar story in the Mr. Robot. If you've watched Mr. Robot, that type of thing actually isn't outside the realm of possibility. Us living in a world where that is our government's version of security, or rather that's a private sector, but you get my point, that sort of semi-regulated, we know what we're doing in a cybersecurity environment role, and letting banks do something that, or a central authority like the central bank doing that, makes me a little nervous just on its own. Just to be completely clear, how often are bank accounts hacked? Very often. Now, the underlying technology offers a number of protections, but if the underlying technology is not written correctly, then you're going to be in the hot water really, really quickly. So I guess there's a couple of things in answer to that question. The first is it concerns me what the architecture is going to look like, how it's going to be handled, and how it's going to be pushed. The second is I don't see there being a problem with like what Jeff was saying if America and the rest of the world started to just accept additional currencies as a form of exchange, because right now money globally in every country you go to is trust. That is all that it is. It's not backed by anything. Right. It's not revered by anything. It's just that it's a representation from you to somebody else that you're willing to change this number on your screen to lower and their number on this screen to higher. It means nothing. If governments collapse tomorrow, if a central bank collapses tomorrow, it goes to zero. Like think Fight Club. You know what I mean? You can literally blow up the right servers and it's done. And that's what bothers me. Like, that's why blockchain is something that makes sense, because it is immutable, because it is something that can actually be held. But I don't think that they ever would give up that control. As you said, I'm sure numerous people, and I'm the same as you, I don't like going down the whole conspiracy theory thing, but I'm sure numerous people have died as a result of trying to interfere with these people's power and control within those systems. I don't think for a second they'd want it to be public, like as in the transfer rates. I think they would do everything in their power to have a permissioned blockchain, not a permissionless open blockchain.
Well, that's the thing. So in order to, there's a lot of discussion about CBDCs. Ripple talking about CBDCs. Ripple wants to use XRPL to create the CBDC. The CBDC is only good for the people if there's full transparency, as Chip had mentioned, and Oz, you're kind of alluding to as well. And so, if we think about it from that notion, we have to be very, very careful as we roll out any other medium of exchange. Because right now with currency, it's 100% based on trust. But the thing is, if I want to spend $500 and I have cash, I can spend my $500 cash and that's it. There's no accounting of that. There's no record that I spent my $500 cash, and that's freedom, to be able to use my money the way I see fit. As soon as you have a CBDC and it's recorded on the ledger, that becomes extremely controversial. We just saw that the IRS accidentally released people's names, in mass. There were a lot of people, and they said, "Oh, sorry, we did that." We saw, even I forget which entity. I don't know if it was through which one of the entities actually accidentally released names of people that are registered gun owners. And finds out that it ends up in the hands of the federal government, which is extremely difficult, because that's not legal. But so there's a lot of issues. So imagine now you move this stuff. This is the problem with the ledger, is that it's going to record things, forever, for infinitum, and so you need the transparency and you need the protection to not be 100% transparent with certain things like that. So how do you resolve that with a CBDC?
One second, I just wanted the Jungle Inc. in the house, and Jungle says, "This is like Elvis's comeback in 1968. Welcome back, Oz. Good to have you." And Jungle, we'd love to get you back on the chain as well, because we love you, another phenomenal guest. But yeah, good to have you in the chat. Go ahead, continue, please. Where were we?
I was just going to say, in response to what Jeff was saying, where's the transparency now? We've moved to a primarily digital payment model, to the point where our society is largely cashless. And right now, I guarantee those transactions are recorded, and I guarantee that it goes to governments, tax organizations, all those types of things. But the average person, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. The right to use cash and to be anonymous during a transaction is paramount, which is why I think even as everything goes on blockchain, you'll still have these cryptocurrencies that are doing their own thing. You'll have privacy currencies and that type of stuff that completely mixes it up. Governments will try and shut them down. New ones will pop up. It'll just be a consistent cycle. But I think right now where we are, there's the average and the general perversion of mind is like, oh, well, it's just spending money. Who cares about what I'm doing? Not thinking about what the consequence of it is, as far as tracking, the ability to track somebody or the ability to invade somebody's privacy and what they choose to spend money on. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that as like to ensure freedom, you would need transparency, but I don't think for a second they'll give it to you. Like
well, that's the thing. So they're moving right now. You take your credit card, right? You have your credit card and you go and you use it. There's a record of all your transactions. You're like, hey, this is awesome. I can look at all my statements. I can look at my transactions. I can see where I've basically traveled to. But is that information given to an entity within the U.S. government? Is that moved to the IRS? Or is that only done through legal action? So if the IRS wants to get
monetary
it,
policies,
right, yeah. So they're not just getting it randomly, but a CBDC on the other hand, could be open potentially to everybody. But you would have to have. We were talking, a couple of shows ago, we talked about a Bill of Rights for cryptocurrency, and there you need to have a Bill of Rights over your money, a Bill of Rights over your CBDC, because there have to be rules of the road, So our Constitution in the United States was put into place to tell the government what it can't do and to tell the people the freedoms that they have, right? And so that's really, really important, when you're limiting government over the people and it's people over the government. So you need the exact same thing for the money. So you have to make sure that, we're protected from the corruption of government, right? And so if we see, and this is the biggest concern, is that if you can add programmability to money, and we saw what happened in Canada not that long ago, where they were shutting people's access to their Stripe accounts. They want to shut down their bank accounts. They want to shut down their credit cards. We saw, things happening over in Australia, at least from our perspective, the way we saw it here, that was, scary, and how the government was treating their people. We see what happens over in China,
New Zealand,
where we're concerned. New Zealand, we're concerned about the digital yuan. There's a lot of concern out there about, government control over its people, because if they decide they want to shut your access to your digital currency, then you're done. Right now, if we go and I can take, $10,000 out of the bank, I can sit on a pile of cash and I can exist for a while on cash. And you can still move around. You can still buy your gas. You can still buy your food. You can still do everything with cash, right? As soon as you go 100% cashless, it becomes a scary world because now they have 100% control of you.
But aren't CBDCs, I mean, part of it is that there's a private ledger. So, I mean, for example, we give aid to, the U.S. just gave a lot of aid multiple times to Ukraine. So, so whether you like it or not, I think people would like to see, especially not even in the US, but almost anybody would like to see, how is that being dispersed? And if it was blockchain based and everything was a blockchain transaction, you would see the entity where that ended up. But right now it's just like goes into like a giant black hole. So that transparency, I would love to see that. But when you have a private ledger, I think this goes back to your original point, Oz, is that they're going to fight for that control no matter what. And if it's a choice between a public ledger or a private ledger, I believe they go with the private ledger, because that way, yeah, okay. And a lot of people say like, CBDCs, blockchain. Well, it doesn't really resemble anything like a cryptocurrency really, other than the fact that it might be using blockchain technology, but the programmability and the privacy part of it. Will any government use a public ledger, and will any government at some point, just like they have adopted Bitcoin as a national currency, will they adopt a DAO? Will they be run like a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, where, like what you're saying in Australia, everybody has a vote, everybody has a way, and it really is truly we the people in that sort of because I mean, our governments are set up for, going back thousands of years, right? You send a representative to go represent you in the capital city, and they represent the people until they get there, and they represent themselves and their own whatever. That kind of happens sometimes. But I want to get your thoughts on this. Yeah, will any government release a CBDC that's public? And who do you think might be the first government to kind of operate as a DAO?
Okay, really good question. I think even in a private blockchain environment, the main thing that would, sorry, just to take a step back, the main thing that we would see that's different to what we see now is we would at least see their Bill of Rights, right? So in a cryptocurrency chain environment, the Bill of Rights is basically left and right center. It's what you've coded as being the rules of what a transaction needs to be, what a transaction can be, how it needs to be handled, how it needs to be recorded, all that type of stuff. So even in a private ledger environment, you would be able to find out what, like from the outside, what are those rules. Right now we have no idea what those rules are in an invisible system, as in how they're handling money, how money's being transferred, what their validation process is to ensure that there's no losses and all that type of stuff that would at least keep them honest. You know what I mean? Like the old fake throw to second to keep them honest type thing. Whereas as far as countries going on public ledger, I think a really, really crushed economy will do it. For the same reason that I wasn't shocked when Venezuela started to accept Bitcoin. And the general rule of thumb in life, right, is if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. So all these countries that have quite strong economics and have spent the entire time with all their real monetary policy, the deeper monetary handling and everything behind closed walls, they're not going to randomly open that up. But I think if there was going to be a country to do it, it would absolutely be someone who is not in, it would be something in the third world or developing world. It would be a country that probably has a GDP in the bottom of the list of every country. So I wouldn't even hazard a guess on who that would be. But if I was going to try and pick a top 5 likelihood, I'd be looking at a list of countries by GDP and then looking at the bottom 5, because I think if they're about anyone's exactly right. Like if your policy's already shot to hell, what do you got? Like let's just screw it up for everyone else, because now they're the one country that's being transparent. Everyone's yeah. I also don't know if all actors into the space would want it to be transparent. Like imagine the money shelters that exist, Cayman Islands, if they had to be transparent around their banking. Like most of their banking is not even done in computer systems. It's done on paper. Like,
yeah, there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Exactly. But there's numerous tax havens around the world that are exactly like that. So I think that's the main reason I keep saying private ledgers to me, I think is such a likely outcome.
Yeah. And here's another, and Alchemist brings up a good point. So the FDIC does have some significance, as we would hope, but I don't know how many people have actually had to utilize the FDIC in a collapsing bank. Does it really guarantee your deposit? Has anyone actually had to use it? And if there was a massive, collapse and run on banks, let's say Bank of America collapsed, as an example, is the government then going to guarantee everybody's deposits, or is that going to cause a major issue within our economy? So what exactly is going to happen? And so we know the FDIC is there to help protect, but we don't have that right now in the crypto space. Could it be there in the crypto space? Could we have some sort of guarantee? And what we're seeing right now, or we get into these ledger environments, and we get into these DAOs. Do people then become more self-sufficient, and are people then going to become their own banks? Because we know that's possible with a ledger. We don't necessarily need the banks to protect our asset. People though will feel more comfortable that their money is in the bank, because it seems to be better protected over there. But if we go to countries like Venezuela, or we go to countries like Lebanon or Cyprus, or when they have a collapse, that's the end of your money. That's they're not giving it back to you. And that's it. If you have a full devaluation of the currency, that also doesn't do anybody any good. Right now the dollar is reigning supreme over all currencies in the world. What's going on? Why is the euro trading on par with the dollar right now? Where I don't know where the pound is. We'd have to look that up, but it's crazy that the euro is on par with the dollar. And so we're seeing a lot of different things happening. Can we balance out the economies of the world? We talk about like places like you mentioned that they don't have anything left. It doesn't matter. Can they go full crypto? I agree. Those are the first countries that will adopt. But then as we start getting into the more Western, economies, more developed economies, we should say, are we going to see adoption? Because we're starting to see economic collapse everywhere. I mean, and we haven't seen the beginning in Europe yet, or we're just seeing the beginning in Europe. What's going to happen? Chip brought up in the beginning, now that they've moved off of all types of fuel and they're going to rely on their solar and wind power to power all their heat throughout the winter. What's going to happen in Europe? You know, we're seeing their economy collapse right now. Why?
Jeff,
you know, what's going on?
Well, luckily we have Turkey Point, which is nuclear power down here in Florida, and very thrilled about that because really nothing's happened with our power, and they're shutting down these nuclear plants, especially in Germany. They shut down their coal plants, and there was an orange man that went over there and said, "Hey, Germany, you better just not be put all your time and effort into this just one pipeline, because you know when that gets turned off," and people laughed. Ha, 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 ha. They laughed openly like that. They laughed, and guess what happened? Well, geez, it's kind of weird. It's kind of what happened. But you know, that's not something that was a difficult prediction to make, because you put your eggs, you know, that old saying, you put your eggs in one basket. It doesn't always work out. The same with crypto too. You know, diversification. Same with stocks and the rest of them. Curious your take, Oz, on what's going on with the lunacy that is the Securities and Exchange Commission and Daddy G Gensler. I've heard you rant on this, and I love your rants on this because I feel like you're just spot on. But if you want to go on an Oz rant, please take the floor, because maybe you can enlighten us here.
There you go. Oz. 1 pound is $1.16.
$1.16. Yeah. Well, I mean, the Australian dollar, the AUD, has always been weak against the US dollar. During points during the global financial crisis, it was actually a really good time to buy stuff from the US. And that was kind of pre-international Amazon and stuff being a good thing. So you'd go to like private sites and buy a bunch of stuff from the US because it was worth your time. But for us, the Australian dollar isn't very strong. The other thing I'll say before I do get into that rant about Gary Gensler is you asked the question about what happens if these banks that are too large, like, do you get your money back? Bail-ins, bailouts. Both of these things are like I'm sure you know about them. A lot of the average populace don't, in that when you sign up for a savings account, what a savings account is a debt that is owed to you by a bank, right? So therefore you become a liability against the bank. Any money they hold for you, they have to pay back. Whereas if you hold a loan, you're an asset because you have to give them money back. They don't owe you, you owe them. Bail-ins are in the finer print of basically every compulsory, I agree to the terms of opening a bank account, and they state that in a sense of having to save the institution, the liabilities can be forgotten by the bank in order to maintain their own system. So that basically means if your bank goes under, sorry. And it's legal.
And that's where the FDIC is supposed to. And that's the FDIC is supposed to step in at that point. And who knows if they will or won't. How would you compare that to what happened with Celsius? Because now we're seeing Celsius acting in the exact same fashion.
You see, I don't know if it can be directly compared. The way I'd compare it probably is back to the GFC stuff that happened, right? Where you had all of these different claims that were going to the FDIC to try and help a number of people out because there were all these problems. And instead, the government just stepped in and bailed everyone out. So they just poured a bunch of big money into these too big to fail type banks. You had obviously BlackRock, which was it was ground zero for where all this was happening. You had money even going into investment firms and that type of stuff to try and bail it out. So I think that's probably the most likely thing that would need to happen. And one of the things I've ranted about in the past about the US currency is during COVID, it was like, more money was printed in the US or minted in the US in that year than all of American history combined. That is dangerous. And the fact that your economy is as strong as it is after printing that much money sends up very concerning signals for me. Like I don't even know what the hell is going to happen next, because it doesn't make sense.
Only because it's a world current. Only because it's currently being used as the petrodollar is like a real thing. But you can see that everybody's weaning off of that system. There's the SWIFT. There's a lot of bad policy put in place, and it's being held together. Quite honestly, I don't know either. It's a mystery. I don't know if it makes any sense why it actually is as strong, and it's we see what's happening in the UK too. Jeff, you just put it up there. What is it? 1 pound is $1.16.
$1.16, and the euro.
I remember traveling there, and it was like $1.85. So it was almost 2 to 1 at one point. And the pound was always very, very strong. And they didn't go in with the whole euro. That was even when they joined the European Union. That was the one thing they said is let's keep the pound. Turned out to be a pretty good thing, but you can see that it's all kind of gravitating towards the same place now. But there's a lot of outside forces, and a lot of this is man-made. Where I get, I think that everybody in at their core wants a really healthy planet and wants things to be clean and wants to work. But there's a cost to everything. You know, there is a cost. And when we look at some of the energy things that are going on there, we look at everything happening, here in the U.S., especially when we look at this whole. Did you get into that Gensler thing? Did you start nailing Gensler on this whole thing? But you get a guy who taught a couple classes for 3 years, who haphazardly at best was supposed. Everyone's like he's pro crypto. Jeff and I were very skeptical, only because we were skeptical for a lot of reasons. And funny enough, when he was over at the CFTC, when he was the chair over there, didn't go after cryptos at all.
No, and he literally came out at times accusing the SEC of not handling it correctly, and that somebody needs to go and knock on their door because they need to be considering these extra things they're not. So in my most recent video, I actually did a big rant on Gary Gensler, to the point where I had a video and I was playing through it and I was pausing it to just sort of be awesome. Like, this is where it is. So my biggest issue with Gensler as the head of the SEC, my biggest issue with the SEC as a whole, is when you've already got XRP, for example. Now, obviously, the argument that a lot of people don't seem to understand is, even if XRP is a currency, is defined by FinCEN, a currency could still be traded as a security, hypothetically. But if that was the case, it wouldn't be an SEC issue. It would be the currency regulated values issue, not the SEC's in the first place. So either way, if FinCEN says that it's a currency, it is not the SEC's place to regulate said currency, even if it's being misused. That would fall back to FinCEN and the other governing agencies around that. So there's the first problem. The second problem I have is Gary Gensler has no idea what he's doing. Like, to the point where he'll say one thing, which we've all heard it 1,000 times, right? It should be perfectly clear. You know exactly what it is. We know exactly what the Howey test is. And then he'll have an interview and say, well, yeah, but stocks aren't treated the same as securities. Oh, so, okay. So are you saying that you would treat cryptocurrencies as securities or as stocks? Oh, no, I'm saying they'd be a third thing. Like, we'd need to define that. So hold on. Didn't you just say like 17 times that it's perfectly clear to everybody and you can't answer the question? Like, you are the head of a global staged, like, the SEC is on the global stage, right? Like, they represent part of the way that people can trust putting their money into the American systems for stocks and bonds, all those different things. I am one of the people, I invest into American markets. So therefore, me seeing that internationally, he's a fucking joke. Like, there just isn't another way to put it. You can't define your own policy, then don't try and charge somebody for your policy, because you just look like a jackass time and time and time and time again. So yeah, I'll stop with my ranting, because I could literally go for an hour and a half, man.
But look at the impact that he's had on a global scale, based on what they've done or haven't done. Temporary. It's temporary. And really, at the end of the day, we're so new into this crypto space. We want everything to happen so fast. We expect it to happen right now, and then we look at the policy. It looks catastrophic. We're 12 years into this thing, and currency's been around for how many hundreds, if not thousands, of years, right? And we've seen the development. We've seen how economies develop. The U.S. Economy has grown for many, many years. This 10, 12 years is a blip in the history of money. And so, we'll get over, the chaos of the SEC. And it's interesting too, because, if the SEC had full jurisdiction and was able to write law, they would have done it already. The fact that the fact that he hasn't, the fact that, he's stumbling over himself, the fact that all he does is bloviate, right? He doesn't have power. Power resides with the Congress. The Congress at this moment doesn't have the appetite to do a damn thing. We've seen positive crypto legislation in the hands of the Financial Services Committee multiple times. Maxine Waters doesn't want to change anything. Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to change anything. They don't want to better the space. The Shermanator out in California, who should be a huge proponent of crypto, is completely anti-crypto. We have too many representatives in the space that couldn't give a crap about the economic well-being of this country. They're too busy filling their own pockets and the pockets of their lobbyists, and so until that changes, which we're starting to see rumblings, we're starting to see that we're going to see some momentum. Just like Fauci's term is limited, at this point. Gary Gensler's term is also limited. People are going to ask for his resignation in the near future, mainly because he is so ineffective, mainly because, you know, he has caused too many problems. And so he will be, you know, I foresee that he'll leave before his time is up. And it's all going to start, you know, come November, because things are going to become extremely, extremely uncomfortable for him because he has had so many missteps, as you've said.
He's going to be testifying in front of the banking committee, I think next week, maybe. It's coming up, I think around the 16th. But if you look at this, you know, the other issue that I have, or question that I have, is that, you know, case law is one thing. In any case, we always refer to, you know, so-and-so versus so-and-so. This was the determination. So we use case law often to determine what's going on. However, when we look at the Howey test, you know, it was, what was that, 1946, 47-ish, you know, an investment of money. This is the Howey test, essentially. An investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profit to be derived from the efforts of others. And Oz, you totally nailed it in the video when you talked about the fact that, you know, Ripple as an entity, it's not, you're not purchasing stock in there. So how can there be an expectation of profit when you're buying something that has nothing to do with the actual organization? But here's what I always wonder about. How is this particular, you know, the only entity in the U.S. that can actually pass a law is the U.S. Congress. So case law, they determined that this is how you discover if so, and this is based on the 33
it's
and 34.
The precedent, basically.
It is a precedent, but I mean but it's based on securities, you know, law from 1933, 34. But especially though it's not past law, right? And all you have to do is pass something brand new to say that this is how it works. And the only thing that I think Jeff and I have ever agreed that Gensler said is when he said, hey, if you want it to be defined, tell Congress to pass something. That's the only time ever he's spot on about that. It's like, go ahead and pass it. But nobody, for some reason, I don't know. And there's all this stuff. And you see, like, you know, a lot of hyperbole coming out with Bitcoin mining is bad. And okay, so yeah, whatever, you know, but go ahead and pass something. You know, we had something here in the US for 50 years, and I'm not going to get into what that was, but 50 years was a decision made by the Supreme Court. A, wasn't in the Constitution, and B, was not passed by Congress. So in reviewing a particular case around this 50-year occurrence, they had no other choice but to say, okay, it's not in the Constitution. We don't have any laws in the books. We got to pass it back down to the states, because that's how it works in the US. And people are like beating their chest, and you didn't do anything. When 50 years, there was a chance and majorities in the House and Senate to actually codify and make it happen. So this is the responsibility of Congress. And I see that this happens often. They word things in such a way. They don't, in that recent Supreme Court case that came out against the Virginia versus the, what was that? Gosh, I just said it to me. What is that? I want to say SEC. It's not the SEC. The other government. There's too many government bodies on top of it. But when they come out and they say that you can't delegate your authority, and here we have and they're complaining about laws. It's like, well, you wrote it in such a way that it was kind of broad. Congress loves the right, because they don't want to be pinned down. Nobody wants to get pinned down like, hey, you pass this law and it says this. It says all this colorful language and it's open to interpretation. And that's why we are here in the US, because of this nonsense.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just to clarify as well, the additional parts. So that part that you brought up was a really succinct breakdown, I guess, of what the Howey test rules are. But when they actually break it down further, it's the existence of an investment contract, which is what's implied by that first one that you showed, which is an investment in a common enterprise, the formation of a common enterprise. So that a common enterprise exists, obviously, in order for it to be the promise of profits by the issuer. Let's just reel that back a little. Who issues the currency when you buy it? Is it Ripple? Or is it the exchange? Is it the person that you're exchanging your money with that is issuing it to you? Yes, the original issuing body might have been whoever built the XRP ledger, which is now a completely decentralized and open, uncensorable, permissionless blockchain that allows people to do whatever they want with it. So at what point can an issuer, even if they wanted to, say to you and have any authority to do so, that if you buy this coin, I guarantee it's going to go up in value, when you don't actually have the ability to make that change. Like they can't press, they can't go to a screen and be like, XRP is now worth $70. Like, it's not how it works. The price is defined by the open market and not
with
by
the expectation.
Yeah,
well, if you look at stock security, it's the same thing. It in some way, could be derived by the open market, what people are willing to pay for it, because it goes up sometimes irrationally. Stock goes up in value. We saw that with GameStop and some others, based on
GameStop is just the perfect example of what the internet can do.
Awesome.
We saw that with AMC, but your point is well taken. Because at that same point, so they would have to prove the case on all 4 points, and obviously they haven't. And Gary Gensler always focuses on just 1 point, and that's the problem, and that's what Jim is alluding to here. It's always point number 4, right? Which is that you have an expectation of profit. But there's other elements, to that. And that's why John was saying, I was assuming this was given, but a legal journal I just read said Howey test didn't actually rule that the oranges weren't a security, and this issue needs to be cleaned up. And yet, they keep going back to the Howey test as if it's codified law. It's a case that was settled, at the Supreme Court level. They then took that same test and said, okay, let's apply that to determine if there's a security. And then, okay, that's great. If this is the test and you have to hit all 4 points, how does the SEC then only focus on 1 point? The notion of profit. And people buy XRP not to lose money, but because it goes up in value. If I buy gold, I don't buy gold because I expect that it's going to lose value. I buy it because I expect it to go up in value, right? So that means that gold's a security. If tomorrow I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to buy euro, because I have an expectation that right now it's trading on par with the US dollar, but 10 years from now, it might go up 40%, and it's going to be trading at a higher. Maybe I'm going to buy pounds because it's at $1.16, but it's going to go back to $1.85. That's a pretty good investment. So if I do that, do I then have an expectation that I'm basing it on the efforts of others, meaning the UK, that they're going to get their shit together?
Like the government right. in the UK? Yeah.
It's everybody. So now, based on what they do, the value of the pound is going to go back up. So now it's a security. So it's the same argument, because they're the ones who released it. They released it with the anticipation of holding value and being more valuable than other currencies. And so, but they're the issuer. So is a security. So the US dollar, the British pound, those are all securities. Is that possible?
That external security representation, like Gensler has said, but then, as I said in review, even he himself has said it wouldn't actually be regulated the same way as a security. It would be a separate entity that needs to be defined separately. So how are you applying the Howey test, which doesn't apply to stocks? Obviously, stocks are something completely different. It applies to securities. You're applying that rule and saying it is this because it is that, but then you're saying, no, it's not that. It's going to be a different thing. So what regulator does this? Just honestly, like, if it wasn't for that public pandering, the damage done to the average holder of any cryptocurrency wouldn't be what it is right now. Like, I guarantee the number of people that will bypass and have bypassed cryptocurrency, at least for the short, medium, or long term, because they heard a central authority say that this was a scam, this was a Ponzi, this was a whatever, is just that's what bothers me more. That bothers me more than the legal case, because that'll all come out in the wash, right? Like, whatever happens with the legal case is going to come out. It'll be a fair court, however you want to look at it. It's the treatment of going in front of the media and being a spruiker and doubling down on these claims without even defining anything yourself that makes the entire industry. There are organizations and individuals that have dedicated the last 10 years of their lives to building out this industry, and you're just shitting on them, basically. Like, that's not okay to me, and that's my problem with Gensler.
Yeah, there you go, Jim D. U.S. dollar is a security for short sellers like us, since we rely on the incompetent efforts of the Fed and government to destroy the dollar.
Right. The only job they have. Well, let's think about gold. Okay. So here's the thing about gold. It's in the ground. Do you know the massive power and energy and what the output that it takes to actually mine gold around the world? No one has a problem with that, right? Because you have to locate it. There's a lot of money that's expensed to find it, and right. So nobody has a problem. There's no central authority to go after. That's probably the only reason. But going back to Jungle's point, And this is John Deaton brought this up so many times. And what Deaton was saying was, guys, don't confuse it. The oranges were not the security. It was the scheme in which they packaged it. That, you know, with the orange groves up here in Howey in the Hills, which is where just right outside of Orlando, it was how they put it together. It's like, yeah, you buy a plot of land. Don't worry, we'll put the orange grove, the trees on there. We'll drill that. We'll take it to market. And the expectation of profit was, but the one Supreme Court judge that wrote the dissension on the opinion said that, well, that's not 100% true, because there was like 3 or 4 or 5 people that said, no, I want to go to the land and actually, even though I own the land, I want to collect the oranges myself and I want to go sell them. And that was why nobody really talks about that part of it, to show you how ridiculous it was, but packaging it up in the scheme. But it comes down to one central thing, is that, you know, centralization is crushing freedom. Decentralization equals true freedom. Centralization never works out for almost anything. Central authorities, central dispatchers, central anything. And the larger it grows, the more evil it becomes and more corrupt it becomes. Where decentralization, for the first time, we have a methodology where that might change. Hey, I like that. First Utopia. I love the show and the community. Love having Oz on here, man. This was really phenomenal. Look at some of these comments, are great.
They could go for stop the panic. The U.S. would do everything it can to protect the dollar, or else the people would revolt. And that's a really good point. That's with most countries. They're gonna keep protecting their currency until they can.
Hang on a second though, Jeff. But if people were able to experience a true sovereign currency that kept value, that was backed by something, you have to applaud Russia. I mean, forget it. Let's not get political, but just the fact.
It's not getting communism, but go on.
Hang on a second. But I'm applauding them for one thing only. Yeah, that's not the part we're looking at. But the fact that the ruble has been beaten up. The ruble has been beaten up throughout history. Right. I used to have an old running joke when people would ask me, "Hey, Chip, what are you doing this week?" And I'm like, I'm going to figure out a way for the ruble to figure out how that currency can really trade better on the open market. And people would just look at me with glazed eyes. And it was a nice way to say, in the South, we say, bless your heart. That's what we say. Bless your heart, which means F you, basically, right? So it was a nice way, but they backed it with gold. And it's like, wait a minute, how is this possible that Russia's doing this? You know, and you have this whole BRICS thing. You know, forget about the US, but if you look at BRICS and the power that it has, you have Brazil, you have India, you have, Russia, this massive coalition that is a good portion of the world's population as far as mass is concerned.
Massive.
And it's a massive entity. It's interesting to see how that would play out. Thoughts, Oz?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of neither here nor there if you're able to introduce it to the general populace, because as I said, the average person doesn't even think about the fact that their money means nothing beyond trust, right? Like, we ever taught that in school? Like, I guess you probably, I mean, I know for myself, I'm not going to assume how you learned, but I know for me, it was because I started to question it. You know what I mean? I was like, but how many people never do? So whether it's backed by a sovereign currency, or whether it's backed directly by a country, the only thing that really matters to the end user, to the average person, is, can you spend it? Can you use it to trade for the things that you want? Is it a good medium of trade? Does it follow, the 4 boring rules of currency? Is it fungible? Is it, is it efficient? Is it all the things that you want a traditional minted currency to be? I think that's all the average person would care about. So I can't see a reason that it couldn't act in place. I just don't see a motivation for governments to do it. I think the Russia thing's a really interesting point, in that I agree with you. I think that I'm not shocked that they were able to do it. I'm more shocked that they did do it, if that makes sense. Like, it just because
they pulled it off. As far as we know.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, as far as natural resources and that sort of thing goes, this goes a little bit further into the whole Russia political thing. But the reality is, there's enough diamonds that have been mined out of Russia that if they wanted to make the diamond ring that you paid $6,000 to be worth 60 cents on an open market, they could dump that much into the marketplace, right? Because that's how commodities work. But yeah, I really don't have anything further on the whole Russia thing. I think that they did it right, but I don't see any other country in the world having the ability to do that. Like, how do you do that when you've got trillions of dollars of debt?
Well, that's it. Especially their economy had sunk, right? Their only resource at this point was oil, and so based on what happened in the past couple years, they basically allowed the rebuilding of the Russian economy. And if you think even previous to the Trump administration under Obama, he resurrected Russia as having any type of authority or power in the Middle East, because before that, Russia was pretty much out of the Middle East. We can get into the whole politics of everything else that happened over there, but whole conversation. But Russia was pretty much, impotent on the world stage. Their economy was in tatters. They had no real power anywhere. And then we saw a resurrection of Russia under the Obama administration, based on their re-involvement in the Middle East. And now we see it again over the past couple of years, which is giving them even more power, which is oil. And so when oil was at low prices, Russia had no money. Brazil was struggling. Venezuela, struggling. Many of the economies in the world that just relied on oil were struggling somewhat, other than in the Middle East. But Russia took the brunt of it. So now to see where Russia is, but they understood, just like in Dubai, they understood that oil and gas wouldn't last forever, and they had to do something with their economy. Russia also understood that they had to do something about their economy, because they know that oil, people are trying to get off of it. They're going to lose their commodity. That means that they have to change their economy. And so the fact that they went to gold, they're trying to reposition themselves as a leader, an economic powerhouse. But Chip, you brought up BRICS. That whole involvement doesn't make sense as to why India is involved with Brazil, Russia, and China. It doesn't make any sense, especially, all things considered. India on its own is a powerhouse, and doesn't need the others as part. But, Chip brings up, to the point, BRICS is the majority of the world's population. That's scary. So that is power if they do hold together. But I don't think India is going to, if India is not in control of it, they can't maintain involvement in that. There's too much controversy and conflict between the members, between China, Russia, and India. I don't see that.
The host is China, right? Like they are right. the hosting nation of it. So yeah, I tend to agree. And it's one of those things as well that's being used as such a fear tactic for such a long time as well, around, China's going to come and they're going to take over the economy, or this country's going to come and they're going to take over the economy. China is a perfect example of why that would never happen. So we're getting into the politics route, but once again, it's my opinion. None of this is based on anything beyond my
opinions. It's just not fact.
But I can get a little pushy though, I guess, when I get passionate about stuff, and I don't.
This is what we like. That's why you're on the show.
So with China, they're a closed economy, right? But they're a closed economy that is stimulated by external sales, export. That's how China has become the financial powerhouse they are. It is not in their sustainable interest, unless they want to become like North Korea, to cut off those supply lanes and to try and overtake another economy, because it would lead to too much turmoil in the short, medium, and long term, that there isn't a logical reason to do it. Like, unless you were just going to glass the entire rest of the world, just drop nukes on every country and turn everything to sand. It's just, there's no motivation to do it. And even if you did do that, it doesn't solve for anything, because the entire GDP of a number of these countries is external sources. So although the main powerhouse being the US, Australia does a lot of exporting of natural resource and that type of stuff, wool, wheat, all that boring crap. There isn't really a risk of them saying, well, let's stop accepting that, because they literally can't get it otherwise. So that's kind of where that balance has always existed, no matter how much there's this massive difference in cultural and political beliefs between democracy and communism and other, I guess, isms. Yeah, that to me, the fear is irrational, because it's not in their best interest. And if they were going to do it, they would have done it in the 80s. Like they would have done it or prior to that, when you're looking at Cold War. Like, there's no point now for them to be a risk beyond anything of pressuring the system to change and get better. And to me, that's why I actually really like the BRICS thing. Like, as in what it could potentially mean for the future of the world, as opposed to the fear that it's going to destroy the world.
So Jim D says, Putin was brilliant in his briar rabbit tactic of being thrown into the briar bush to have NATO sanction him so he could sell oil and gas at a higher price, hinge to gold, and harm NATO economy. That is a very astute observation right there, Jim D. Beautiful. Yeah, it is funny. It's like, oh geez, that is something right there, you know. And the thing is, it's also, you know, the gas is the natural gas, the oil is massive right now, and it's really what's going to really hurt. Europe is really going to take it on the chin, especially when they shut down like their coal plants, their nuclear plants. I'm just happy we live in Florida, Jeff, because if something does hit the wall, I mean, we complain when it gets to be like 40 degrees here, which is like, I don't know how it's Celsius,
however, when it rains, Chip, then you lose power. I lost power 3 times yesterday.
Oh yeah, but see, you're further south. Up here, we're a little more stable. We don't have those fluctuations as much. When I was
DJ brings up a good point. Sorry, I just want to throw that up. But he said, so why did all 3 just agree to legalize crypto for cross-border payments? And we saw Russia just did that.
Yeah, so, right on. Yeah, crypto, and it's like, you know, and yeah, I mean, look, the brand name, Jeff says this often, the brand name is Bitcoin. People are like, oh, Bitcoin. It's interchangeable with a lot of other products in history. You know, here we have Kleenex, you know, a tissue for your nose, because Kleenex was a name brand. Everyone started calling it a Kleenex, and it was a generic term for, hey, pass me. And now it's like, when you Google that, yeah, you're going to use Google, but it's almost any search engine. You know, it's a verb. Can you know, I Googled that, and it's synonymous with Bitcoin is synonymous with really cryptocurrency in a way. I mean, yeah, they're talking about one particular entity, but I think ultimately that the more people talk about Bitcoin, you know, let's say I was introduced by a Bitcoin maxi. I was kind of a little bit of a maxi myself. My first one was XLM, because I bought into the whole notion of, you know, oh, this is super bad because, you know, the banker's coin and it's not decentralized, but, you know, Stellar is. And then I did research, and then you're like, oh, that was silly, but, you know, it happens. But it's good to see sometimes where we come, you know?
I think it also just makes sense that Russia would be doing it right now. Like, think about the global landscape and what's happening with sanctions and finances going into the Russian environment. Like, of course, they want to switch to an immutable transferability of money without having to worry about the traditional, like, yeah, it makes complete logical sense to me. It's like, well, if like the whole Ukraine thing is a horrible situation, just to be clear, I'm not laughing at that, but I am laughing at the idea that people would be surprised that Russia would try and find another way around these sanctions. Like, it's logical, right? Like, if you can't get there by walking, by car, you get there by walking. Like, it's just, if it takes you longer to put the railways in place so you can use cryptocurrency and therefore have it forever open, then you'll do it. And you're a communist regime, so you can do whatever you want to do.
Exactly. Hey, can I break the topic a little bit, break the plane here on the topics here? Let's dig into what are you binge watching? Are you into this new Game of Thrones? Are you watching any of this stuff? Because we always talk a little bit about what's happening either in film or streaming. What's something that you can recommend, or something on your radar? You know, I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones guy, but you know, this House of
I was
Dragons.
Never a Game of Thrones guy at all. I've never watched it.
Okay,
actually, I watched 2 episodes. The first 2 episodes.
Okay, hang on a second. This is where I was, right? So a buddy of mine said, you got to watch it. 3 episodes in, I'm like, dude, this is not going well for me. He says, please stay with it. It's really slow at the beginning. And I was like, all right. And I stayed with it right around the 4th, 5th episode. And I watched the entire thing through, and I was but I was where you were. I was like, dude, not a cool thing, but it does get a lot better. But I'll say that. What else?
Was it Tower of the Rings or Power of the Rings? The new Tolkien.
Another one. Like, everyone assumes because I'm a giant nerd, right, that I'm a Lord of the Rings guy or I'm a Harry Potter guy. My wife is super she's into Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. Like, she likes mythical and that type of stuff. I'm a video game nerd, as you can see, in pop culture and TV shows nerd. But when it comes to books and stuff, I generally read, like, I'm way more boring. I read like sociological studies and resource books. Like, that's the type of person I am. I'd prefer to read a textbook over a story. Even when I was younger, it's like autobiographies is about as creative as I would get when writing comes out. So
remind me not to invite Oz to our book club.
Yeah, he's not going to be in our book club. We'll be reading like textbooks on like the monetary, you know, unless it's like Jekyll Island or something. Holy cow!
Well, last week in book club we talked about Calvin and Hobbes. No.
What about comic strip, picture books? No, what about Vikings? Jeff and I are like into Vikings and the Last Kingdom, like that kind of. Have you seen any of that?
No, none of it. Like
but you are into The Witcher, though.
I'm into The Witcher from the original books and the video games which then turned into the TV show.
Did you
I don't mind the TV show, but I still had to kind of bear through it. So in short, the shows that I watch, I'm one of those annoying people where it's like I give shows a chance, and then I really enjoy them for a short amount of time. And then if the season ends, I just forget to watch it again. One show I fucking love, Ted Lasso. If you haven't seen the show Ted Lasso,
seen Ted Lasso. It's on Apple.
It's an incredibly it's on Apple TV. Or it's on your Plex if you know which kinds of services.
I'm gonna watch that at some point. What about The Walking Dead? Because that's like my all-time favorite.
I have watched The Walking Dead.
Walking Dead universe.
I went through like a number of those shows at that point. It's a bit further back, but Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is another great one. If you haven't seen Better Call Saul, it's just finished and it's definitely worth the watch.
Oh yeah, what is it? Is that good?
Yeah,
recommended it, and I've never seen it.
It's really good, but it's the pacing is similar to Breaking Bad. If you've never seen Breaking Bad, just to kind of put that into perspective, not just for you guys, but anyone who might be watching, just put it into perspective. It's really good at telling a narrative. It's really good at teasing it out. But if you're in a rush to get to the point, it is not the show for you. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where it shows you what's going to happen by the end of the episode in the first scene, and then it slowly peels it out. If you want to sit down for an hour and have to pay attention, great show. If you want to watch it in passing, watch something else. Watch like The Office or The Simpsons or something.
Where did Alan go? Anyway, Alchemist going back to XRP and leveling the playing field. But Hydroponics Alan said, if you're married, you have to watch Outlander. I watched Outlander when it first came out. Yeah, I watched it. You know what happens with a lot of these shows? They become redundant. And it becomes so repetitive. Back in the day when you had one episode a week and then you had to wait for the new season and it dragged on over years, a period of time, then it was, but when you start binge watching and you realize that every show is pretty much exactly the same, but when they spread it out, you don't get it. And so I'll watch shows and then all of a sudden you get to like the 6th episode. You're like, this is fun in the beginning.
I need to stop watching this for a bit. But see, this is something that blew my mind. So I said before, I've recently had my first child, a young son. And when I was a few years ago, when I was thinking about when I was going to have kids, the thought that was in my head was, I'm going to have to explain to my kids what a VCR used to be. I'm going to have to explain to my kid what a CD player used to be. I'm going to have to explain to my kid at this stage what TV used to be. Like,
that's right.
I take that informal poll whenever I'm around new people. It's like, hey, just out of curiosity, as a side to our conversation, do you watch TV? And they're like, no, I watch streaming services. Like, so within the next 10 years, just no one is going to bother to watch TV because they have to wait, right? And we live in that society of you want 15-second TikTok clips. You want instant answers to questions that nobody asks. Like,
my son has never watched TV. My son, he's 13, never watched TV, never watched a show. He calls every show as a movie. Didn't like movies for the longest time, loves YouTube, watched all the YouTubers, watches YouTubers on his video games, loves playing Rocket League, and that's it, and so even now, I come in playing Rocket League and he's got YouTube going, right? And it's a crazy dynamic because I see a lot of his friends are the exact same way. Just like no engagement with TV. It's all YouTubers. And I'm actually happy with that because you see a lot of the shows and the way they twist narratives, and that's why some of the shows, they could be really, really great. And all of a sudden they put the political narrative into it. It's like, I like watching Star Trek, and I was excited, when the Picard show came out and I watched the first season. It was good. Then the second one, all of a sudden they had an episode got super political. Like they started getting political. I'm like, well, you just ruined it. This sucks, and I tried to bear through it for me. Maybe other people loved it.
No, but see, I don't mean, I agree, really, but for me, it doesn't matter what side it even falls on. Like, even if I agree with the politics of what you're preaching, I don't think you should be preaching it. You know what I mean? Like that's my problem. It's like, this is entertainment. The whole reason I watch a TV show is to not think about the real world, to escape the real world. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole reason that it's entertainment. You don't want to think about how shitty the world we live in is. You don't want to think how shit human beings can be. Well, you just want to just do your thing.
I will say this. So the flip side of that, my youngest daughter just turned 18. She just went off to university. And here's what's really weird. So a couple years ago, she was getting those disposable cameras. And she was super...
When they brought the Polaroids back.
Right? No, not Polaroids. No, the cameras you take them to get them developed, like a couple days and get them developed. Yeah, my older daughter went through that craze with the Polaroids, and I'm like, we did that because we had to, not because. I go, I have got one of the most powerful phones on the earth right here. I mean, it's camera. I mean, on my phone. And so here's the flip side of that. Then she wanted a record player. I'm like, a record player? She goes, but it has USB. I'm like, we had to use that because that's what we had. I mean, thank God. I mean, we had that weird thing where it was LPs. And then we had a weird transition with 8-tracks. I was too young to remember that. But my parents went through that 8-track phase where if you wanted to hear a song, you had to click, 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 click 4 or 5 times to get it back. And I remember being a kid clicking it all the time because there were 8 different tracks in there. Then there was the cassette tape era. So my kid, she gets 8. Then she starts buying. So we start going to like places like Goodwill and you can get like buying albums. She's like, hey, check this out. I picked up this John Lennon. I'm like, John Lennon, you got picked me up a John Lennon? My God, it's perfect condition. How much you get that for? 50 cents. I'm like, what? So here I've got the collection because my parents sold all of mine in a garage sale, but that's another story. For $5, by the way, pretty good take. All my albums. So I was off at university, so it was all good. So she not only did that, but she was panicking as we were getting ready to go to university 7 hours away. She's like, oh my God, I can't find my camera. I'm like, what camera? She goes, my disposable. I had pictures on from like 2 nights. And I said, like, and she would have to go and I had to give her money because it was like $12 or $14 to develop a roll of film.
Because there's places left on earth that do it.
Walmart, like for some reason, Walmart does it. And it's really weird when you go there. It's like, here, let me see and then the quality's bad, as it always was. There's always got like a weird haze on it. There's always someone in the pictures like a flash of light, and they're like, but she loves.
And someone's got their finger over the lens, and it's got the white part on the top left corner of the picture.
I love those disposable cameras. They were the best.
And you know what we figured out with this? What we figured out as human beings with our powerful phone cameras is what we didn't realize when you saw these amazing photographers when they were young. We didn't realize that they blew through 15 to 25 rolls to get the picture. We took ours were like coveted. It's like, should we take a picture of this? Yeah, it's a special occasion. Click, and it was like the worst picture ever. It was like
people are blinking. One person's like falling over.
Yeah,
like...
looks like there's like some weird picture. But but we didn't know that they took 40 or 300 or 6,000 photos. It was just like click, 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 and then they looked at it and they blew it up, and it was like the most gorgeous picture ever. And we realized with this is like we can take 400 pictures and just keep the ones we like.
Exactly.
Look who wandered in. We got DNI just wandered in.
Digital Nomad Investor. I was gonna throw up the WEF sign up there, or the it was funny because I actually had a story to talk about on here, which was but anyway, I want to just say, guys, go do me a favor right now. Go follow Oz Crypto. He's at Oz Crypto #2. Make sure that's the right one. Oz Crypto, and the #2. And follow him, and also go follow him on YouTube. And where else can people find you? Is that the 2 main places people can find you?
Those are the 2 main places. I'm actually about to start doing a regular podcast.
Nice.
That's kind of something that I've been building up to because I've got a couple of guitars within arm's reach. I'll just show you this one really quickly because it is one of my favorites. It's the old SpongeBob Strat.
My God, that's fantastic. That's a beautiful. SpongeBob Strat. I've never seen that before.
It's a custom. It wasn't,
but it's a Strat. It's an official Strat, right?
Yeah. It's an official Strat, but then there was an artist that did a bunch of painting and stuff on a couple of them. So you can also just get ones that are wrapped with stickers quite easily. But anyway, my point was, I used to do a lot of music stuff myself. Played a lot of guitar and keyboards and all that sort of stuff. So for that reason, I've been trying to rebuild out my studio. And
where can we hear your stuff, Oz?
Eventually I'll make sure that I put it out on my YouTube channel and through Twitter and all that type of stuff.
Come on, dude.
So
come on, man. You right here. Tell me. All right, so I will say this. I will say this. I have my stuff is available right there. You can see it all. There's Halcyon Days, and you can buy it. You can just listen to it for free. But I will drop this in there. You guys can listen to my singer-songwriter stuff right there. Bam.
Yep.
There's and if you click over here, you can can actually listen to you can click the lyrics too, right there, man. There you go.
Then you can go.
Oz, I raise you.
You can go to Berserker's channel and you can jam with Berserker. They do jam sessions over there.
Yeah, no, to be clear, I don't plan on releasing music or anything like that. What I was saying was I've rebuilt out my studio for like vocals to be better. Because right now my vocals are decent, but I need to, make sure preamps are in place and get shielding and all that type of stuff. Because this is a study that I'm in right now. This room is huge, but it's a study. It's the size of my old living room. But yeah, I need to do a lot of sound deadening and all that type of stuff. It is one benefit to having the nerd shelf though, is the ambient sound. Sorry, this isn't at all talking about cryptocurrency.
Well, these mics right here are a big reason why Jeff and I sound so much better. These Sures, this is the Joe Rogan.
SM7B?
Yeah, SM7B. They're really fantastic. The thing about them is they got to be close. But one cool thing about using the streaming tech that we use, which is StreamYard, is that all of that stuff is automatically built into it. So if you can't overmodulate, I don't have to worry about getting the settings right. I don't have to worry about accidentally hitting my mixer. And this is the things we went through. And it's like, that kind of weird stuff where now it's just great. And I'll say the best thing Jeff and I ever did was get these mics. So you think, Jeff?
Yep. So I've got a hard cutoff.
All right, listen. Show. That's it. We'll give you the last word, Oz, on the way out. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everybody who stayed with us. We went longer than usual, but we had to. It's Oz Crypto, man.
We'll have to do this again in the future, guys. We'll have to do something with Jungle as well, and we'll need to make sure that we make it official. But if anyone who's watching this right now who's not subscribed, because I know you guys are there. I see you. Don't pretend that you're not there. Where you're watching these streams every single day, but you're not subscribed and you haven't got the little bell ring. You're going to miss one, or you're going to miss two, or you're going to miss three. Don't do it. Just click subscribe, man. Just okay.
And the notification bell.
Yeah, the notification bell is everything. Otherwise, you just don't get told when stuff happens.
It is everything. That's right.
There it is right there. So go search Oz Crypto if you're listening to the podcast.
Great videos.
I dropped it in there as well, but there it is right there, man. Look at that right there.
Cheers.
3 years
but
ago.
Do it on this video. Subscribe on this video.
No, man. Don't listen. Let's not promote our own horn.
You're not. I am.
I hit the thank you for that. I just hit the sneeze button. Thank God, man. That was like a weird one. I would have been blowing everyone's eardrums out. But there you go right there. Oz Crypto. Cool.
Oz Crypto, ladies and gentlemen.
It's kind of like it's fantastic.
Coming to us
but I dropped
the
it in there. But subscribe to Oz and you go follow him on the Twitters. And dude, you have 300 and how many videos? I thought 320 videos.
I have so many, man, because when I first started, I was releasing one a day for like 3 years or something insane, or it was at least a couple of years. Then I dropped off, and now since I'm back, I'm often days releasing 2 a day.
Nice. That's a good metric.
Just trying to
get it going.
Just trying to get it going exactly. Because I'd like to transition and have a bit more time to look at other things as well. I've considered other. I won't go into that here. We can have a conversation separately.
Yeah, there you go too. And it's funny. I could do a podcast in so many different things, like just featured, but it's this is the one we do, and sometimes Jeff and I do some other alternative subjects in another arena, but I just don't have the time. But anyway, man, such a great having you here. Jeff, you want to take us out?
That's it. Oz, thanks for coming on. Really great seeing you again. It's been a long time. We'll look forward to having you back on in the near future. Love your show. Make sure everybody out there subscribe to Oz. And as always, we have the best and the brightest in the YouTube space gathering here with us here on the chain. Alchemist wants us to flip the switch, and we know it's hidden somewhere in Australia. So
Oz,
it's in the future.
I'll start looking.
It's on you, Oz. So if you can start looking now, report back to us in a couple weeks. Let us know that you found it and you're flipping it. That'll be awesome. Until then, we'll look forward to checking everybody else out back here with us Sunday evening.
And we had a request to play the original outro, which we are going to play for you right now. And Oz, hang on for a couple seconds. I know Jeff has to go, but let's hang out for a little bit, and we'll see you just in a second here.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops. Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.